Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is YAHMAD. So we're going to be looking at some more examples from paper 3 for spreadsheets. So we're going to be looking at examples from 2016, 2015 and 2014. And then hopefully at the end we can compare all the different types of spreadsheet exams which have come up for paper 3 over the last few years. Okay, we're going to be focusing on June 31, 2016. What I've done to make this task easier is I've included the lookup sheets on an extra sheet. So these are normally found on external sheets. I've just included it onto the same document. Okay, so in cell B4, which is this cell here, enter a function to look up from the lookup sheet, so it will be this sheet here, the name of the currency for Honduras. So as you can see, we've got the different projects at the top. Okay, if I go to the lookup sheet, I've got the currency in the third column. So we're going to be using Honduras as a lookup type. Honduras is down here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. So hopefully we're going to look in the third column to find the currency. So it's always good to have a quick look at the lookup sheets. Right, so it's going to be a vertical lookup, so equal V lookup. And the lookup value will be Honduras, comma, and then the table array will be in this document here, on this sheet here. So you highlight from what you're looking up, and then you go right. Okay, and I'll have to type in my absolute cell reference manually. Oops, with the dollar signs. Normally you'd use function and F4. Okay, the column index is the column which the currency will be in. So we said before, the column index will be the third column of what we selected. And what we want is the exact match. And that's the same currency we saw before. Okay, let's look at the next question. In cell B5, enter a function to total the amount of money in local currency for the Honduras project. So we're going to be looking in this cell now, and the function we're going to be using is the sum if. So the sum if will basically total if there's a given criteria. So we want to find out the total amount of money in local currency for the Honduras project. So we're going to be using the information in this range here. So we've got the different projects. As you can see in a second, we've got Honduras. Okay, and the amounts of money. Okay, so it's going to be a sum if. There's three parts to a sum if. So adds the cells specified by a given condition or criteria. So the criteria will be Honduras. So what a sum if does is basically add cells by a criteria. So only add cells from a given criteria. So the first part of this function is the range. Before I can look at the range, I need to know what the criteria is. So the criteria is going to be Honduras. Where can I see Honduras? It's going to be in this range here. So I'm going to highlight this range of cells, and you'll see Honduras in a moment. Here we go. So here we have all of the different projects within this range. So this range needs to be absolute cell reference, locked into place. Okay. Now the criteria is the project, which will be Honduras. This will be relative cell referencing because when I replicate this function, this will move according to the relative position. Comma, and the sum range is basically what we're looking to add up from. So we're looking to add up from this range here, which will be parallel to the range to this one here. So sum range is the values we're looking to add up from. Again, this range will be absolute cell reference, which will mean it will not change position when I replicate this function later on in this task. Okay, so just before I close the brackets, look at the colours. So the blue part refers to this range here, Okay, the green part is the criteria, so you'll find this criteria within this range here, and then the purple part refers to the sum range. Okay, so when it finds the criteria Honduras, we're going to be basically adding up these values together from Honduras. Okay, so I'll close the bracket and press enter. Okay, let's look at the next question. In cell B6, which is this cell here, enter a formula to look up from a lookup sheet. So we're going to be looking up the information in this sheet here. The exchange rate from a local currency to US dollars for Honduras. So we need to be looking up the exchange rate to US dollars from a local currency to US dollars. Okay, so I'm going to just highlight this part first. That's the first part we're going to do. The second part I'll ignore and get to that point after I've done a looking up the exchange rate. So I want to split this question into two parts, or three parts actually. But let's do the first part first. So let me highlight this question. So we're going to do this first part. So again, it's going to be a VLOOKUP. We can look up the project. Okay, go to the table array. So you highlight from what you're looking up, you go right. So we want the exchange rate, which is in the fourth column. And again, we're going to absolute cell reference this table array. Okay, the column we're looking for is the fourth column, which includes the exchange rate to US dollars, and we want the exact match. So that's the first part of this question done. Okay, we've got the exchange rate here for Honduras. Now the second thing we have to do is multiply this value by the total for the local currency. So what we have to do is basically multiply the value here by the local currency. So if I go to the end and click on the star for multiply, we have to multiply the exchange rate by the local currency. Enter. Okay, so we've just done this part here. So we multiplied this value by the total currency. So it's good to split the question into separate parts. There's no point in trying to do the whole question in one go. And the last part which we have to do is round to nearest dollar. Okay, so after the equals we can type in round. Okay, and then if we come to the end, we want to round it to the nearest dollar. So we're not going to have any decimal places, so we can type in 0. We can close the bracket and then press enter. As you can see, it's been rounded here. Okay, so replicate the formula entered for each project. So again, now we can just replicate by dragging across. So here you got the project and then the currency. This is a local currency, so we're replicating this, and this is the last part which we have to replicate. Okay, so if I'll click on the cell, you'll see the criteria is changing according to the relative position of the cell. Last question, in cell H6, enter a function to add up the total income in US dollars. So we're just going to use a sum function, so equals sum. We have no criteria. We just want to basically add up all of these values together for each project in US dollars. Enter. Okay, so we've come to the end of this section. So this was quite a difficult, challenging question paper. I haven't completed all of the tasks. You'd also have to basically change or put these into the correct currencies. So to change these into currencies, you go to format cells, and when it loads up, click on currency, and then you'd have to find the correct currency. So either the symbol or the code. Sometimes they provide you with the code as well. So we had three parts. We had a VLOOKUP, okay, which found out the currency. Then we had a SUMIF, which basically totaled up all of the values according to the criteria, which was by project. And then we had a VLOOKUP, which looked up the exchange rate. which was then multiplied by the local currency and then rounded to the nearest US dollar. And actually the last part was the equal sum. So I haven't put the currencies in place, so that would have been something you would have done to complete this paper. Okay, so now let's look at June 32, 2016. Okay, so let's look at the first question. In cell E17, enter a function 2, so E17 is this cell here, to look up from the pay grade table, which is this table here, the annual pay rate for this employee. So there's two parts to this question. I'm just going to first of all do the first part. So look up from the pay grade table the annual pay rate for this employee. So what can we use that exists here and exists here? So it's going to be the pay grade. So it's a VLOOKUP again. Okay, so we want to look up the pay grade. That's the lookup value. I'll do it up here. Comma, and the table array is this table here. So this needs to be absolute cell referenced. Comma, and a column index is going to be the second column of what we highlighted. And then we want the exact match. Okay. So now we can do the second part of this question and multiply this value by the multiply this by the value in a works column. So this is a works column here. So what we can do is basically multiply this value by the works column. Enter. Okay, so it's given us the same value because it's 1. Okay. Right, so let's look at the next question. In cell G17, enter a formula to display. So G17 is this cell here. Full time if the works column contains 1. So I'm going to highlight this as green because that's going to be first true statement. Okay. Not started if the work column contains 0. So again, this will be another true statement. And then this last part will be the false. Okay. So for each true statement, we need to have a logical test. Okay, so what we're checking for is this cell here for the logical test. So I'm just going to colour it in for your benefit. You don't have to do it in the exam. So let's start. It's going to be a nested if because we've got multiple conditions. So equal if. Okay, so the first logical test is going to be if the work column contains 1. So this cell here is equal to 1. Actually, we don't need to put 1 to speech marks because we're referring to a numeric value, so not a text string. Okay, so if F17 is equal to 1, okay, the true statement will be full time. So if this is true, we're going to say full time. Close the speech marks because this is a text string. Comma, we have a second condition, okay, for not started, so we're not in a false yet. So again, we type in equal if, or not equal, just if. Again, we have another logical test. It's going to be in the same cell. So F17, if F17 is equal to 0, and if that's true, okay, so I'll put my comma in. If that's true, we're going to say not started. And the false value will be part-time if it's not 0 or 1. Okay, and close the speech marks and then close the brackets until you get back to the black one. So the green one closes this bracket here, and then the black one will close the first bracket. Okay, so we have two logical tests. So the first condition is checking to see if F7 contains 1, and if it's true, then it's going to be shown as full time. If this statement is not true, we check the next condition. So the next condition checks if F17 is equal to 0, and if that's true, it's going to show not started. If that's not true, then the false statement will be shown which is part-time, which means it's not 1 or 0, it's anything else. Okay, so I'm expecting to see full-time in a cell because 1 is in this cell here, so the first statement is true. Okay, in the next question, cell H17, which is the cell here, enter a formula to calculate the weekly wage in rupees, rounded down to nearest paisa. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the second part, but let's look at the first part. Enter a formula to calculate the weekly wage in rupees. Okay, so we have the annual salary here, so obviously it's 52 weeks in a year, so what we need to do is enter a formula to divide this amount by 52. Okay, so 1 year equals 52 weeks. Okay, now the second part is we have to round down to nearest paisa. So 1 rupee equals 100 paisa. So paisa is like pence, like in currency, so you might have £1 and 50 pence. So we have to round it down to 2 places. Okay, so yeah, rounded down. I'm just double checking. Yep. So I'm going to click after the equals, type in round down. Okay, and the number of digits is 2 because we want 2 paisa. Okay, so now replicate the formula entered for each employee. So we have to drag this down. So if we go to the corner, when the cursor changes to a black cross, we can drag down. So I've just coloured in the cells just for your benefit. You don't obviously wouldn't have to colour in the cells in the exam. Okay. And typically in the exam, like the last example, you probably would have to put in the currency values. I'm just focusing on the formulas and functions for this part of the task. Okay. In cell H48, enter a function to add up the total weekly wage bill. So in H48, we just need to enter a simple sum function to add up the total weekly wage. So we can highlight this range of cells, and we can close the brackets, enter. Okay, so this question paper included a VLOOKUP where we had to then afterwards multiply to another column. So again, be careful, do the VLOOKUP first, check if the answer is correct, and then do the multiply part next. Okay, and then the if statement, we're checking for 3 different conditions. So the first 2 would be the true statements, logical tests. Okay, so we're checking if this was 1. If that was 1, then we say full time. If it's not 1, the next condition we're checking for is to see if it was 0. If it was 0, we would say not started. If it's not full time, not started, then the employee would be part time as a false statement. And the last part, we had to work out the weekly salary, had to divide the annual yearly salary by 52 because we have 52 weeks in 1 year, and then we had to round it down to 2 paces. Okay. Let's now have a look at November 2015. This question paper includes a test table. I've copied and pasted this test table onto the sheet, so it's just easier for us to complete. Okay, so let's look at the first question. Formula will be entered in steps 11 and 12, so it's basically steps below. These will not produce results until test data has been entered into cell F5. So this is cell F5, hours worked. So as you can see, it is blank. So if I do type in a formula which includes this cell, it's not going to work until we type in some test data. So let's look at the first question. Cell G5, which is this cell here. Enter a formula to calculate the pay for this employee using their pay rate and the hours worked. So we have to enter a formula which will basically multiply the pay rate by the hours worked. And we're not expecting to see any results, but as you can see, the cell is still blank. Okay. Now what we have to do is select appropriate data that you can enter into cell F5 to test this formula. So I'm going to type in 10. Okay, so it's basically 9.45 multiplied by 10 gives us 94.5. So the reason I chose 10 was quite an easy sum to work out, and it's quite obvious to see it's correct and it's working. So, okay, enter this data into the data chosen column of your test table. So it's not my evidence document, I've placed it here. So the data I chose was 10. I expected to see 94.5, and the actual outcome was 94.5. Okay. So I've recorded the expected data, and then I've recorded the actual outcome as well. Okay, let's look at the next question. In cell H5, so let me see H5, which is this cell here. Enter a formula to display the word yes if the hours worked are greater than the contract hours. So if the hours worked are greater than the contract hours, then we're going to display the word yes. Display the word no if the hours worked are the same as the contract hours. Okay. Or display the word incomplete if the hours worked are less than the contract hours. So this is going to be a nested if. So let's split this down into 3 sections. So I'm just going to make some space. Actually, we'll do it here. Okay, so the cell we're checking for the logical test is going to be hours worked. Okay, and also the contract hours. So hours worked, I'm just going to write this down for my reference. It's going to be F5. And the contract hours is going to be E5. So contract hours E5. E5. Okay, so the first condition that we have to check. So enter formula to display the word yes if the hours worked are greater than the contract hours. So the first condition will be hours worked F5 is greater than the contract hours. Okay, so which is E5. And then we're going to display the word yes. So hours worked are greater than the contract hours. So hours worked is F5 is greater than the contract hours. And if it's true, we're going to display the word yes. No, if the hours worked are the same as the contract hours. So if the hours worked, so F5 is equal to the contract hours, which is E5, then it's going to say no. Okay. If the hours worked are the same as the contract hours, so no if the hours are worked are the same as contract hours, or display the word incomplete if the hours worked are less than the contract hours. So we don't need to show a logical test for the false statement, we can just have that information here. So we've got 3 conditions here basically, yes, no, or incomplete. If the hours worked are greater than the contract hours, we say yes. Okay. If that's not true, the next condition is the hours worked the same as the contract hours, so equal to, then we say no. Okay, if it's not yes, if it's not no, then it's going to be incomplete. So let's just enter this formula now. So equal if. Okay, so first logical test is going to be, if you look at this example here, so hours worked are greater than the contract hours. Okay, and if that's true, value if true, we're going to say yes. Comma, we have another condition, so it's not at the false yet. Display the word no if the hours worked are the same as the contract hours. So we're going to be referring to this condition here. So we're going to say if again. This cell here is the same as this cell, we're going to say no. Comma, and then if it's false, if it's not yes, if it's not no, then a false value will be incomplete. So we just go down to the question again, or display the word incomplete if the hours worked are less than the contract hours. So in the false part of the statement, we write incomplete. So just checking the spelling mistakes. That's fine. Again, we have to close the brackets until we get back to the black one. Okay, so why do we have incomplete? Incomplete because the hours worked are less than the contract hours. Okay, what if I typed in 36? We got yes, because the hours worked are greater than the contract hours. If I want to display no, what do we have to do? Hours worked are the same as the contract hours. Okay, so if I type in, if you can see here 35, if I type in here 35, it should give me no. So that shows me each part of the formula if statement, nested if statement is working. Okay, so now we have to look at the second part of this test table. So select 3 items of appropriate data you can enter into cell F5 to test this formula. Enter this data into the data chosen column of your test table. So we want to check each part of this formula is working. So the first test I'm going to do is, the first number I'll type in is 10. Okay, 10 in F5. Let me just go back to the question. Record in the expected column of your test table the output you expect to see in cell H5. Okay. Enter each item of test data into cell F5 and record each result in the actual column of your test table for each item of test data. So if I type in 10, what do we expect to see in H5? Incomplete. So we expected that because it's less. And that's what we got. So I'm just going to increase the size here. Okay, if I type in something that's the same, we expect to see no, which is what we get. And the actual outcome was no as well. And then if we type in something greater, so the hours worked are greater than the contract hours, so we're typing 36. Okay, I expect to see yes, and that's what we got. So for this test table, there is no point in typing in values which are all below the contract hours. So let's say if I type in 5, 6, 9, because it's giving me the same output. So what you want to do is type in values which will give you different outputs. So basically you want to check each part of this formula is working. So we want to type in a number that's going to be greater, that's going to be the same, and obviously we want to check the false condition, so a number that will be less than the contract hours. Okay, so I've completed this part of the task. If I go to the actual exam paper, later on in this task you will be asked to enter in some hours, okay, into this column here. So you will be asked to put some hours in. So read through the question paper, read through all of the questions, don't jump the gun, don't type in any hours you want. So you basically only wanted to put in hours into this cell for the test table. Then eventually if you go down the question paper, you will have to enter hours worked into that particular column for each employee. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at the June 31, 2015 paper. So this is a very small spreadsheet exam. There's only a couple of functions which we need to enter in into these two cells here. Okay, so let's look at the first question. So in cell A5, this cell here, enter a function to look up the name of the region, okay, using the code entered in cell A3. So we need to look up this value here to find out the name of the region. So UK would give us United Kingdom. Okay, so this one will be a VLOOKUP. So we want to look up, if we click up here, as a lookup value, the name of the region okay, using a code entered in cell A3. So we want to use this code here as a lookup value, comma. The table array will be here, so we can highlight this section here of the table. Just go to absolute cell reference. The region is in the second column of what we highlighted, so press number 2 and then I can click on the exact match. Okay, and we should see United Kingdom. So if I change this to USA, we should expect to see United States. Okay, and as you can see it's working. So that's the first question. Let's change it back to United Kingdom, so UK. Okay, next part of the question is in cell A6, enter a formula to calculate the price of the Maldivian rupiah into the new regional currency. So we basically, first of all, need to work out the rate, okay? And then we have to multiply by the value entered in this cell here. So let's do the first part. So if I do equal VLOOKUP, so lookup value again is going to be UK. Now for the table array, we need to go to the third column, which includes the rate, the exchange rate. Okay, for column index, I need to highlight or identify the rate is in the third column, so I type in number 3. And then I want the exact match. So that's the first part done, okay? So let me just read the question again. In cell A6, enter formula to calculate the price for Maldivian rupiah into the new regional currency. So I've got the exchange rate here, but what I need to do next is basically multiply this value by the number or the value in here. So enter price in rupiah. So this will calculate the currency. Okay. Now we have to edit the formula that we entered in cell A6, so it rounds up the value to the next whole number. So we want to round this value up. Okay, so before I round up, let me explain what we've done so far. So first of all, we've got the name of the region according to lookup UK using this table array here, and we got the currency value which was in the third column, which is then being multiplied by the number we typed in here. So now what we want to do, we want to round up this value to the next whole number. So after the VLOOKUP, if I type in round up, okay, and then if I come to the end, I want to round up to the whole number, so type in 0, and then if I close the bracket, that should round up to 1. So this was a very short exam, hopefully straightforward enough, but we have to think about this question, think about what it is that we need to do, and try and split the question into separate chunks. So my advice for this question here, the first thing you should have done, just done the VLOOKUP to look up the rate, and then we multiply by this cell here, so A3, so this is a price in rupiah, hopefully I'm saying it right, and the next part was to round up to the whole number. Okay, now we're going to move on to November 2014. This is actually a more difficult exam paper for spreadsheets. In this exam, we're going to be using count functions, VLOOKUPs, nested ifs as well. So there's going to be a range of functions which we're going to be using in this exam. So let's go to the first question. In cell B3, which is this cell here, use a function to count the number of item codes in this invoice. So the item codes are here. So we want to use a count A function, counts the number of cells in a range that's not empty. So basically we want to use count A. We can't use count because count only counts numbers. We want to count item codes, which is a mixture of letters and numbers. So if I highlight the range and then close the brackets, that should give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, in cell B4, use a function to calculate the total number of units in this invoice. So we've got units here, and we want to basically work out a total number, so we're going to use an equals sum function. Okay, the next question in cell C12, which is this cell here, so we're going to be looking at a type, I think. Use a formula to look up the type of cycle. Use the first character of the item code as a single lookup value. So the first character of the item code will be this character on the left, okay? As a single lookup value. And November lookup sheet for the array. So we're going to be using the information which is stored here. Okay, so what we have to do a VLOOKUP again. But what we have to do here that's different to what we've done previously is look up the first character of the item code. So the first character is on the left hand side, so if I type in a left function, then for the text, if I click on the item code, comma, and the number of characters from the left will be 1 because we want the first character only. I need to close the brackets to get back to the VLOOKUP. So now I'm back to the VLOOKUP, comma, the table array is here. Okay. Just go on to absolute cell reference. Comma, and the type is in the second column here. So I'm going to type in 2, and then you want the exact match. It's going to be the exact match because we're looking up only one character which matches up here. So I think the character is M. So it should give us mountain when I press enter. Yeah, so this is giving us mountain. So we looked up M as an exact match here, which gave us mountain as an output. Okay. Right, let's look at the next question. In cell D12, use a function to look up the unit cost for the cycle. Use the item code as a single lookup value. So in this exam question now, we have to use the whole item code as a single lookup value and the November lookup sheet for the array. So again, we're going to be looking up this sheet and it's going to be this range here. Okay, the function must include both absolute and relative referencing and must not include a named range. So again, it's going to be a vertical lookup. This time we're going to look up the item code as a complete value, comma, let's go to the table array, which is going to be here, and we're going to highlight this range here, let's lock it in, make it absolute. And again, the column index price is in the second column of what we highlighted, and again we want the exact match. So when we see that particular code, we're going to get the cost or the price. Again, we've got the unit cost here. Okay, so this function must include both absolute and relative referencing. So the relative part is going to be the item code. When I replicate this function, it's going to look in a relative position for the item code. The absolute is a table array which has been locked into place. In cell F12, calculate the total cost for this item. So this is cell we have to look at. We have to work out the total cost for this item. So we've got a unit cost and we have to multiply by the number of units. So we're purchasing 5 of these mountain bikes. So we have to multiply that together. And the next question is replicate the formula entered for each item. So I'm going to drag it down. Okay. I'm just going to change this into currency just for now. Right, so we're up to this question now. Okay, so in cell F18, which is the cell here, use a function to calculate the sum of the item column. Okay, so we have to use a function. So we use the sum function to calculate the total value of this column here, and then close the brackets. This will be the invoice subtotal before any discount has been applied. So we will be applying discount to this value, the company offers discounts to customers based on the number of units they order. So based on the number of units which they've ordered will depend on the amount of discount we can give. Okay, so at the moment this person has ordered 31 number of units. So that's basically adding up all of these values here. Okay. So the company offers discounts to customers based on the number of units they order. So now let's look at the next question. So in cell F19, use a formula to calculate the discount using a subtotal. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to highlight each of the cells which we're going to be using in this question as we go along. Number of units. So don't get confused with this. Number of units is this cell here. And the 3 discount rates, A, B and C. Okay, so basically I've highlighted the cells which we're going to be using as part of this formula. So what we're going to be doing next, it looks like it's going to be a nested if. Okay, so I'm going to do one part first. So I'm going to work out discount type. Okay, and then we can multiply by the subtotal later. Okay, so what is the question? So use a formula to calculate the discount using a subtotal, this one here, the number of units, this cell here, and the 3 discount rates, A, B and C. Multiply the subtotal by, so it's going to be discount A if less than 5 units are sold. So if I come down to here, if I go up 1 second, so we're going to be using this cell as a logical test, so I'm just going to change that into another colour so we know we're going to be using this cell here. So it's going to be B4. B4 less than 5, then we're going to say discount A. So what we can do, we can reference that cell. So discount A is in B7, so we can type in B7. Okay, the next part is where we get confused. So let me highlight the less than part. Like I said, let's focus on the less than part between 5 and 19. So 19 inclusive means to include 19. So as you can see in this diagram here, we want to include 19. So what we can say is less than 20. So again, the cell which we're going to be checking for the logical test is going to be the number of units, which is B4. So if I type in B4 less than 20, then we're going to say discount B, which is in B8. And then the false statement is we don't really need a criteria for the false statement. So if the number does not fall within this range and within this range, then the criteria will be discount C, which will be B9. So discount C will be if it's 20 or more. So let me type in B9 and let me explain this diagram before we start to answer this question. Just going to zoom in. Okay, and I'm just going to highlight the key parts of this question here. So the first part was, I've made this diagram here and got the key numbers highlighted first of all. So the first number which we need to look at is less than 5. So we're not including 5, we want to, if the number falls within this range here, less than 5, which is 4, 3, 2, 1 going downwards, then we're going to apply discount A, which is this cell here. Okay. If the number is between 5 and 19, so including 19, so what we can say is less than 20, then we're going to apply discount B. Okay, so the reason I focus on the less than part is because if the number does not fall into this range here, so it's not 4, 3, 2 or 1, then we're going to be starting from this point here for the second criteria. So the number has to be 5, 6, 7, 8, however less than 19. So if we just focus on the less than part, the number should fall into this category here, or into this range here. So let's say the number is not less than 5, okay, so we can rule this out, okay, and it's not between 5 and 19, then we will be applying discount C. So if you were doing this diagram, I would write down the key numbers involved. You can draw a little line to say this is a first range. Okay. If this statement is true, we apply discount A. If it's not true, we check for the second statement. So between 5 and obviously 19 inclusive, so we do less than 20. So always focus on the less than part. So if the number does not fall into this range, then we can just look at this false statement, which will capture anything else. Okay. And then we have to multiply by the subtotal. But like I said, let's just do one thing at a time. So let me come up here. I'm going to zoom back out so I can see my diagram to make it easier. So the discount amount. Okay, so let's do the if statements here. So I'm going to cell F19. Yeah, I'm going to write cell equal if. And the first logical test is this cell here. Is it less than 5? And if it's true, we're going to say this discount value here, B7. Okay, so it's good to plan ahead. Comma. So if that condition is not true, let's check for the second condition. So if, again, the same logical test, same cell, B4 is less than 20, so that will include 19. Or you can do equal to 19, less than or equal to, but it's up to you. So if it's basically, we're saying between this range here, we're going to apply discount B. Okay, and then the false, we said if it's not discount A, if it's not discount B, 20 or more units sold, we're going to apply discount C. Because I'm not replicating this formula, there's no need to absolute cell reference anything. I'm going to close the brackets. Okay, so the number is 31. So we're expecting to see discount C, so 0.15. Okay, and that's what we've got. Okay, so now if I double click on this cell here, okay, you'll notice I've used the number of units for logical test. I've referenced to each discount value. We still haven't used the subtotal, so that's the clue. We need to do something. So whatever we get from this if statement, nested if statement, we then have to multiply it by the subtotal. So if I put a star, and then if I click on this cell here, now you can see each of these cells has been used. So it's good to identify which cells will be used before we start any function. Okay, now the last question here in cell F20, which is this cell here, F20, use a formula to calculate the invoice total, which is a subtotal less the discount amount. So we've got subtotal and discount amount. So it's a simple subtraction. So you've got the subtotal minus the discount. Okay, and that's the end of this question paper. So again, we did use a number of different functions. So for the first time, I saw a question where we had to extract the first character as a lookup value. So we had to use an equal left and the first character. So we had typed in 1 at this point here. Okay, so that's the first time we saw that one. This was a typical VLOOKUP. Let me just put the currency in. Okay, and then a nested if. Again, these can always be really difficult to understand. So maybe a case on a scrap piece of paper in the exam, you make a little diagram, you focus on the numbers where it's less than. Okay, automatically if it's less than 19 and it doesn't fall into this range here, then we're going to start from 5, 6, 7, 8. So we are now come to the end of our spreadsheet tasks, where we looked at a number of different examples from different papers and different years. So every paper is different. It's not predictable spreadsheet, it's paper free. So my advice is to work through the past papers, look at the different examples, look at the different types of questions. Some question papers are much more easier than other question papers. Obviously some papers are more difficult. So this one you'd have to use your math skills, to be honest, to work out the percentage differences between the grades or between the visitors. Again, this was the first time where I saw in the if statement we had to use a VLOOKUP as a true statement. Okay, so you have to be, thinking outside of the box, because anything could turn up in these papers. In this paper here, we had to insert an extra column to work out those employees who work more or less than their contracted hours, and then we can filter those results out. Here we had to use an average if. Now we haven't used an average if in many years for exam papers, so this came back up again. So it was a long time since I saw an average if, and you'd had to basically reference each cell, or you had to create an own table in order to get the average if statement in. So you would have to write down these titles for the regions, either by writing them out, or you can click on the equal formula and then reference to a particular cell. So if I double click on this one here, it references to D4. Look, in November 2016, you had a nested if. March 2016, a test table, and I think there's a big chance the test table could come up in this during this summer's examinations as is part of the new syllabus. June 31, we're using the VLOOKUP, but slightly different to how we may have used it previously. So again, you have to get familiar with how the VLOOKUP can be used. So normally we used to use in clicking on the lookup value, which is on the left, but the lookup value is above. Okay, June 2016 was straightforward enough, I feel. Let me just come to here. So if you are doing a VLOOKUP, try and do it in two parts. If there's a multiplication, do it after you've completed the first part. And we also had an if statement to work out if they were full-time or not started or part-time employees. The November 2015 paper, again this one was a really difficult paper because a test table came up and some students were confused when they had to type in a formula and they did not see any results until they typed in data into this cell here. So again, it's different from most of the other papers. And this one was again confusing. It was only a short exam. We had to basically look up the region name, which was quite straightforward. But then this part was a little bit more difficult. We had to do a VLOOKUP, then we had to multiply against this cell here, and then eventually we had to round it up. So this function here, we have to do it in three separate parts. So we had to look up the rate first. Once that was correct, then we can multiply with the price in this cell here, A3, and then we can round it up to the whole value. And November 2014, for the first time, we saw a value which had to use a left lookup, looking up the first character from the item code. And again, we had a nested if, which was very confusing. So in the exam, last piece of advice, even if your nested if is not working, leave it as it is. If you print it off, you'll pick up some marks. So hopefully you've been able to see the differences between the papers. Very unpredictable. The papers are not the same. Every paper, every year, there seems to be something different. Thank you for your time again. Please subscribe to this channel. Please put your comments below and please like and share this video. Thank you again for your time.